go somewhere, you know that if you go somewhere, you don't go empty-handed, right? We bring a gift. So here we're making an offering to the, like as a request for the teachings. So we imagine we're offering to the Buddha right here. And what we're offering, it's called a mandala. And what that really means is the abode of the Buddhas. But in our case, it's like our abode. It's like the world. So you're just using your creative imagination and imagining all the gorgeous things of the world, all the objects of the senses that make people happy. And you're kind of piling them up and making an offering of this to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. It's got a very nice meaning. So Jennifer's going to sing it in Tibetan, I think.
Yes, Roy will sing it for us.
But we can put it on the, who's going to sing it?
Roy. He has a
beautiful... Oh, Roy, is he okay, Roy? Hello, Roy. Put it on the screen for us, a little, just the short one, not the long one. Okay?
Okay.
Is that okay, Roy? The short one.
It's great.
Good. So just you visualize, as he's singing, we just imagine all the marvelous things, thinking we're offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Wonderful. And Jennifer's going to do other offerings up there. She's going to offer something else. We've got a cutter there. What's she on? What else is she offering? So I can tell people, what are you offering?
This is
Jennifer.
offering.
Oh, okay, good. So this is what she's doing. Okay, this is even more esoteric. This thing looks like 10-pin bowling. It's actually it's a depiction of the universe. Okay, so she's offering, there it is offering, and then she's going to offer the representations of enlightened body, a statue, speech, a text, and a stupa, which represents enlightened mind. So this is kind of auspicious so that we can cultivate enlightened body, speech, and mind. Okay, let's go. Where's that prayer again? Where's that prayer? It's off the screen. Okay.
Venerable Robina, you're muted, I think.
So it's my turn, or are you going to say something? Yes. Introduce me. People might know who I am.
You right before you came, but I can do it again.
You know, just as well. That's good. I'm very happy. So I'm out of the way. Good. Okay, darlings. Okay, so I hope you got your course notes. I sent these course notes, which are excerpts, just some excerpts from Lama Yeshe's book, which I'm using as the basis of our teachings these 4 weeks. Lama Yeshe's marvelous book, Mahamudra. Yeah, which is this gorgeous teaching that Lama gave in Australia, actually, in 1982. I always forget the year. 1982, I think, at our teacher center. And it was the very first main course, I think. There's one in a city 2 hour, Bendigo, a town 2 hours north of Melbourne. And yeah, and Lama used the text of the Panchen Lama, the 17th century Lama, the Panchen Lama, called, I forget what it's called or something, but it's the text that Lama used to teach this teaching. So what is Mahamudra? I mean, oh no, I should do a prayer first. Sorry. A little prayer. Can we put that up on the screen as well? The refuge prayer. Just to set us going in the right direction. Better do my job properly. Okay, the first two lines of this prayer, for those of us who figure we are already Buddhists, so this is reiterating our reliance on the Buddha, taking refuge. And the second two lines are stating our motivation. The Lamas say, stating your motivation. We might say, what's our purpose? Why are we here together for this evening and this next 4 weeks if we're staying for everyone? We're here, so we're going to listen, and that means me as well, I promise. Listen to these words, these teachings, about the ultimate way that things exist, in particular the mind, and how to, and it's basically we're listening to this so we can take some tools from it to use these tools to develop our amazing potential. That's what we're going to talk about. Buddha's incredible view of the potential of human beings, so that we can, develop our own potential, fulfill our own purposes, and be of benefit to others. Develop the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. Or another way to put it, as Lama puts beautifully in the book, this whole concept of I.
Watching a good men. What are you watching?
Mad Men.
Mad Men.
Barbara, darling, why don't you mute yourself, sweetheart? Dearest Barbara, thank you so much. I got a shock. Thank you, Barbara. Welcome. So anyway, it's as Lama says in the book, and we're going to, the very positing of an I assumes other. So this is the suffering of all the world, isn't it? It's the whole of samsara. So what we're trying to do here, what the discussion, the talk here, is how to realize the emptiness of the mind, the non-self-existent existence of the mind, so we can cut the root of all delusions and be of benefit to ourselves and others. So we're going to listen to this with that in mind, to these teachings with that in mind. Sangye cherang soke chognam la janshu baru dagni kyabsu chi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye cherang soke chognam la janshu baru dagni kyabsu chi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. And I'll say one time in English, adding a little bit extra words. So what we're saying is, until we are enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And by the virtuous karma we create by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, so we can be of benefit to all sentient beings. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to read quite a bit from Lama's book throughout the time. I'll read, because Lama's words are very powerful, very, and anybody who knows Lama knows this. So it's introducing Lama to those of you who don't know him. So Mahamudra really it literally means, Lama talks about this, it literally means great seal, which sounds pretty abstract to us, but it's referring to this word emptiness. It's referring to this ultimate way that everything exists, but particularly it's looking into the nature of our own mind. So this is why the subtitle of this book, Mahamudra, how to discover our true nature. So really, I think we need to talk about the mind first. Let's discuss, because this is the whole point of the whole book. Buddha's view about what the mind is, and Buddha's view about what we can accomplish. I think in our world, we have our own marvelous sets of psychology and neuroscience and so on and so forth. But I'm not so sure we have very articulate and even very confident views about potential. We don't talk so much like that, of our human potential. We know we've got potential to be brilliant scientists and engineers and architects and musicians and cooks, but I'm not so sure we talk with great optimism about the potential to be unneurotic, less deluded, less miserable, less depressed, less unhappy, more kind, more wise, more joyful, more compassionate. I don't think we talk like that, And I think whether we could become a musician or a mathematician or a multi-billionaire, we all know we want to be less neurotic and more happy. So some of that, and that's Buddha's expertise. It sounds kind of cute and simple to say it this way, but essentially it's this, in fact, Buddha's view is so outrageous, we can't even hear it. I'd love to always quote this, that the word Buddha itself, which is the end result of all this hard work, if you kind of engage in the Buddhist path and you abide by, you follow Buddha's methodology, you follow Buddha's techniques, you follow Buddha's practice, you study Buddha's teachings, Buddha's views, Buddha's philosophy, the whole point of it is to end up as a Buddha. That's the Mahayana view. There are different goals, but this is the goal of the Mahayana view, the goal that we're discussing here. So it's incredibly delicious just to hear the etymology of this word, Buddha, Sangye in Tibetan. The first syllable, Bud or Sang, implies. And this is the exact point that Buddha's making, which is so esoteric and so bizarre to us, we just can't hear it because there is nothing equivalent in our modern psychology with respect to us. And so what Buddha's saying is, and it's indicated by this syllable, Bud, that we can rid the mind utterly of all delusions, all ego, all sense of separateness, all sense of me and other, all unhappiness, all fears, all delusions, all ego, all jealousy, depression, anxiety, attachment, these words that we are so familiar with, stuff that we are utterly familiar with and which we assume, and I think our neuroscientific models and our psychological models assert this, that the presence of these states of mind are so utterly normal that you'd be weird if you didn't have them. That's how deeply we take these things for granted. And so it's hard for us to hear these words. And this is not a complicated statement. This is not some complex intellectual. We're going to talk about emptiness and then we have to squeeze our brains. It's definite. Lama jokes, we need to squeeze our brains. But you don't need to squeeze your brain to hear these words. They are totally simple. The Buddha shows from his own direct experience. He's not a creator. He's not putting this on top of us. He's not speculating. He didn't make this up. He has observed this and done this himself, that the mind can be rid utterly of all sense of separateness, all fears, all ego, all jealousy, depression, anxiety, etc., etc., etc. The words we are intimately familiar with. I mean, this alone is so shocking. It's kind of, we can't hear it, you know. Or we say it and it sounds, it's religion, so we put it in the sky. We don't take it seriously, you know, it's kind of mystical. Oh, wow, I can become a Buddha, wow, you know. But what does Da tell us? That's tasty. That indicates, you know, that implies Da, Ge, Sangye, Buddha. That implies not only can we rid the mind of all the rubbish, we can grow, we can develop to perfection, and this is literally true, to perfection, everything else in the mind. Love, compassion, wisdom, and the bonus being joy. I mean, good Lord, happiness and joy. This is what Buddha has found to be so. This almost seems too simple. I mean, when we hear that these Tibetan, you know, that like in the Tibetan monastic university system, which directly comes from back to the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th century in India, the great Nalanda tradition, as his Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama always tells us, we are the Nalanda tradition, this amazing, unbelievable monastery in India. And then the Tibetans picked it up and took it over, and it's been extant in Tibet, and now out of Tibet. The Tibetans are keeping it alive out of Tibet. This amazing system of studying this vast Buddhist worldview, you know. So you'd be thinking, well, that's the end result. I can get rid of all the rubbish and grow all the goodness. Why do I study all this Buddhist philosophy for 27 years? Well, it's kind of because there's various reasons. Why? One of the major reasons is, even though these words are so simple, is that these delusions, these, you know, unhappy emotions that we are intimately familiar with are so profoundly ingrained in the depth of our being. And the Buddha would say, based on his view that our mind is not the brain, that our mind, we're going to go into this, that our mind did not come from mummy, daddy, or a creator, and it certainly didn't come from nothing, that our mind came fully programmed into this life from countless past lives. This is just the Buddha's view, this is observation. This is a view that's been around for several thousand years in India. It might be a brand new idea to us, but it's a very ancient view, and it's, you know, presented deeply and profoundly, deeply and vastly in all the Buddhist literature. That this mind of ours is deeply, primordially, instinctively habituated with these states of mind, the neurotic ones. So much so, and this is not being rude to us in our modern world, that they are considered to be an utterly normal part of a normal person. So normal, like I said, that you'd be considered wacko if you didn't have attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, to one degree or another. Sure, we know we don't want lots of it. We know we've got a problem if there's lots of it, but to think that you can utterly rid yourself of all of it, that's really kind of a radical, weird idea. And when you first hear it, when you hear it properly, I remember one course we did just last year, I think, one woman, she literally, I mean, I can understand it. We discussed it and she was laughing, but she said, that's insane. You'd be mentally ill. So all that points to is, you know, how utterly we take this stuff for granted as a normal part of a normal person. So it's quite interesting. I mean, it's quite shocking to hear this. And that's why it's so shocking. That's why we make it kind of sound like religion. We put it in the sky. It's something mystical, you know. But this is actual down-to-earth, doable, it's a proper doable job, you know. I mean, of course, Buddha didn't talk Greek. He didn't say the word psychology. Every time we have anything wrong with the mind or anything to do with the mind, we give it a Greek word, you know. because we track ourselves back to the Greeks, don't we? Whatever. Buddha didn't say psychology. He said the word mind. You know, he used the word mind. That's his expertise. That might not be evident to us initially in the world. It's quite shocking to hear this because we think of it as religion. We don't think of it as psychology. And then also what's interesting, when we say the word psychology, we just assume Western psychology. We assume it means modern psychology. So when we think that Buddhism is psychology, sometimes some people think it's insulting Buddhism because it's squeezing it into a narrow box. No, we've got to broaden our view of the word psychology is what I'm suggesting. I mean, all psychology means whatever it is, psyche or something, whatever, isn't it? Greek. It means the mind. So that's Buddha's expertise has been, you know, and where did this view come from? I think it's so fascinating. I always quote this. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, you know, I remember saying somewhere, he said, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. We thought it was Mr. Freud probably, didn't we, 100 years ago? No, more than 3,000 years. Buddha came out of this incredible system, this incredibly sophisticated, brilliant system of psychology, metaphysics, philosophy, and the rest, you know, and practice. They're the ones, I mean, these Indians were the ones, and this is what we're going to talk about here, the major meditation technique we're going to be describing here in Mahamudra, the two techniques. This is a practice of employing the two main meditation techniques in Buddhism, insight meditation and concentration meditation. That's what we're going to be discussing. That was, I mean, concentration meditation, samadhi. The technique is known in terms of its result, calm abiding. This is invented by the Indians before the Buddha, you know. I mean, this is astonishing. It's only now in the modern world that we're discovering the brilliance of these beings, you know. So we're going to be discussing the mind. Mahamudra is about the mind, how to perfect the mind, how to develop our true nature, how to become a Buddha. So, okay, so Lama's book. Let me just see if I can just read you a bit from Lama to get you going. In the course notes you've got, they're excerpted from this book, but I'm going to read you from time to time about from Lama just to touch your hearts. So this book is about the very specific utilization of the two main modes of meditation in Buddhism called calm abiding and special insight. That's what this is all about. It's a meditation technique, you know. So, you know, so Lama talks in particular, I'll read from this chapter. I think some of it's in the book. Mahamudra is beyond words. Mahamudra is beyond words. Let's just read a bit of there. See what Lama says. Where are we? All right. So Lama's saying that so there's various words, Lama, you know, that Lama's using, like the word non-duality, the word emptiness, the word non-self-existence. All these words are synonymous. We're going to be discussing all these, okay? So the Lama's saying, you know, that the reality of non-duality, this is the way Buddha's talking, in this way here they talk, that the reality, okay, Buddha, a bit context first. The way Buddha's talking, essentially the way Buddha's talking, one way of saying what Buddha's saying is that one way of presenting Buddhism is as a path to stop suffering and as a method to get happy. That's definitely one way of presenting the entirety of the Buddhist worldview. Another way of presenting it is that it's a system of ethics. There's no question about that. Another way of presenting is it's a method for stopping ignorance and getting happiness. Stopping ignorance and getting wisdom, sorry. And what's fascinating in Buddhism, that all these utterly come together. Now we might not be sure we want wisdom. It sounds a bit of a grand kind of word, you know, don't mystify it. And we maybe we know we don't want ignorance. We're not sure if we want ethics. We definitely want happiness. We don't want suffering, but they all come together. And I find this really fascinating. You check in our world. We all want happiness. There's no question. I mean, everything, this is what Buddha's pointing out, everything that drives every living being, every second, every dog, monkey, and human, every second is the wish to avoid what we call suffering and the wish to get what we call happiness. We're going to be discussing these exactly, the Buddhist analysis of what these words mean. Now, the wisdom and ignorance one is kind of curious, you know. Sounds a bit sort of grand. Well, what's wisdom? Wisdom in the Buddhist view means being in touch with what exists. It's very simple. And why he says this is the crucial point here. Because he says at the moment, what these neuroses in our mind that he has found that we can get rid of, why we would even want to get rid of them is because they are the source of our suffering. This is the fundamental point that Buddha makes. It's something, again, the words are so simple, but quite shocking because we do not believe that for 1 second. We know anger is terrible. We know depression is awful. We know fear is horrible. We know jealousy and despair and anxiety and low self-esteem are horrible, but we would never think that they are the cause of our pain. We think it's the boyfriend or the event or the politician or the food that cause those things that is our problem. But the Buddha's view is about this mind, so we're going to go into this one. But the crucial point I'm getting at here is the reason Buddha says that we suffer is because these states of mind, these unhappy neurotic states of mind, these disturbing emotions, these neuroses, whatever words you want, and Lama uses, I've identified 21 synonyms. Lama has made up his own words to try to convey to us the horribleness of these unhappy states of mind. The word they use in Buddhism, as we all know, if we study, the one word they use is the word affliction. Lama never used this word because he knows it's just a dumb word we don't use in our culture. It's old-fashioned, it's arcane, you know. But delusion, yes. So these unhappy states of mind, they have a very particular function of causing us to be delusional, of causing us to not be in touch with reality. When we can get in touch with that characteristic of these unhappy states of mind, we are on track in understanding Buddhism and what causes us suffering, and therefore in understanding how we can get rid of them to stop suffering. So in other words, the Buddha's method for stopping suffering is to stop ignorance, is to quit the delusions, rid the mind of the delusion. So the result for the person who's done this job of achieving Buddha, simply speaking, even the first part, is that you've quit suffering. You've quit this sense of a separate self. You've quit attachment, fears and drama and delusions and the nonsense. And that's the point that Buddha has identified. He has identified that these unhappy states of mind are the source of our pain, are the source of our suffering, and it's, look, check, it's obvious, are the cause of why we make a mess of others, why we harm. Look at the world. Do you think people kill, lie, steal, rape, terrorize, drop bombs because they love you? Because of love and compassion? I don't think so. Because of these delusions, these neurotic, deeply disturbing emotional states of mind that Buddha has identified. And the Buddhist psychological model coming from these Indians identifies them at a very deep level, at a very subtle, they drill down deeply. And this is the job we need to learn to do. Getting all the way to, this is the point now with Mahamudra, getting to the root delusion, the primordial instinctive misconception about the very ontological status itself of our own I. This is the root delusion. And Mahamudra's job, this technique's job, is to cut that one in a very quick and delicious way, you know. So Buddha's method for getting happy is get wisdom. And this is absolutely true. It might not be evident. And I think in our culture, we can see it's not evident. We know there are brilliant people on our planet, geniuses, you know, technologically brilliant people. Genius physicists, genius musicians, but we know perfectly well that person who's a genius with wisdom coming out of their ears can still go home every night and beat up their husband and children. So we, in our culture, we see that wisdom has zero to do with happiness. So, but this is the point, the Buddhist point, which is quite a revelation. And when we can get this, it really is very kind of, it's quite insightful. To understand the Buddha's method for getting happy is the method for getting wisdom. Why? Because delusions cause us to be ignorant, cause us to be living in la-la land, cause us to not be in touch with reality, and therefore to suffer, and therefore to harm others. That's the Buddha's analysis. I think it's quite a unique one. But it's not, and these words, again, are not complicated. We think it's complicated. So our job is to know our minds. Our job is, as Lama would put it, to be our own therapists. Our job is to unpack and unravel our minds, recognize at the grosser level that these the branch, the day-to-day delusions, so we can unpack and unravel those, so we can begin to see nakedly the root delusion and uproot that. And that's what the Mahamudra meditation technique is a quick, quick if you're qualified, a quick direct method for cutting ego, for cutting ego grasping, for cutting the root delusion, and therefore cutting the suffering at the root. That's its function. So the reality of non-duality, so the Lama, okay, the Buddha's saying, I keep trying to read Lama, I keep giving you background. So that the ultimate way that things exist, this is how they talk, the ultimate, the final actual existence of all phenomena, this is the way Buddhism talks, is that things lack this intrinsic nature. So hearing that is weird to us. What do you mean things lack an intrinsic nature? Why we can't hear it is because we so believe things have an intrinsic nature. We so grasp at things as having an intrinsic. We don't know that. We never thought ever once in our life. Who taught us this? Nobody. Mummy didn't tell us, darling, things have an intrinsic nature. No, Buddha's telling us we all believe everything has, and that's the root. That's the function of the root delusion. The root delusion. This primordial ego grasping, known colloquially as ego grasping. Its function is to believe in and hold on to this sense of a concrete, real, separate, intrinsic, set in stone, absolute me. It's so primordial that we don't even have an equivalent of this in modern psychology. And this is what Buddha is so marvelous at identifying this subtle, this primordially deep, subtle delusion. The Indians, you know, I mean, who am I? I haven't studied all the great, amazing Indian philosophers. But that's where Buddha diverged. Buddha diverged exactly on that point of investigating the nature of self. The nature of self and everything else Buddha says, this are the Buddhist words, have no intrinsic nature. They lack this intrinsic nature. They have this interdependent nature. They lack an intrinsic separate nature, non-duality. They lack that. So they're not dual. I mean, this is the words they use. And these Indians had this amazing, they went as far as they could go. Buddha went as far as he could go with these genius Indians, but he said they still hadn't gone far enough. That's where he diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to the nature of self. So this teaching is about that, the emptiness of the mind, the emptiness also of the self. So the unique thing about this technique is it's a meditation technique. So he's saying, Buddha's saying, that everything has this everything lacks an intrinsic nature. And when we've realized that, we've cut the root of suffering, we've cut attachment, which is the main voice of ego grasping, we've cut aversion, cut all the other dramas. You know, this is getting to the root, getting right, sort of cutting to the chase, you know? So everything lacks an intrinsic nature. Everything has this non-dual nature. Everything is, all these words I use. So Lama says the reality of non-duality, which is the way everything exists, is inescapable. It is inborn nature of all phenomena. It exists equally in all things, organic, non-organic, permanent, impermanent, including all beings. It exists always within us. The name we give it in this context is Mahamudra. So Great Seal, they would say that this emptiness, this non-duality seals everything, sort of like, they say everything exists because everything is empty. Everything exists because it has non-duality. So it seals the very existence of everything. It's something like that, you know, something fundamental. It's the way things are. There's this word in Buddhism, suchness. It's the way things are. It's just how it is, you know, in the depth of its bones. So the trouble is we totally believe in exactly the opposite of non-duality. We grasp at a dualistic me, a self-existent, real, separate me. We've been grasping at it since we were in our mother's womb. Actually, the belief in this simultaneously born ego has been with us since beginningless time. It's beyond intellectual. Even ants and dogs have it. And as the great Mahayana scholar Chandrakirti points out, this primordial belief in a separate me creates the concept of other. From this tremendous gap comes the evolution of all of samsara, the cycle of existence. To knock out this hallucinated vision, we must realize Mahamudra, non-duality. The realization of Mahamudra cuts the wrong conceptions and destroys the nuclear energy of ego. This is revolutionary, more revolutionary than any political ideology, and it brings you totally beyond fear. Mahamudra is the antidote to fear. So beautiful. I mean, this is something we could spend the next month, just that sentence, you know. There's something utterly fascinating, actually. The word fear, we all know that word intimately. We mightn't use it every day. You don't say you've got fears every day, but we know the word. If you see a person having a full-fledged panic attack, they're in the grips of incredible fear. And we can see sometimes we can see that sometimes the person is believing utterly in what they're saying. And that's one of the key qualities of all the neuroses in our mind. The Buddha says that this root delusion, ego grasping, which Mahamudra cuts, its nature is fear. Its nature is fear. Now, if you look at the branch delusions, and we're going to be going to these, attachment and aversion and jealousy, have a look at a person who's totally jealous. They're having a mental breakdown. They're in the grips of fear, of losing or whatever it is. I mean, all the delusions, we don't think it this way, but you look at it, a person raging in an angry fit, spit coming out their mouth, eyes wide, a child stamping and shouting and throwing things. I'm sorry, they're having a complete mental breakdown. That's a panic attack. We just say, oh, look, they're angry. I mean, look at them. Their mind's gone berserk. And the words they're saying are completely delusional. You're thinking that your sister who just took your something when you're a little girl, you think that's the end of the world has just come and she's the cause of all your suffering. We know this. And so this is one of the key points that Buddha's making, but we're so familiar with this, we don't join the dots, you know, that all these unhappy states of mind, especially the root delusion, are in the nature of fear, and they're deeply, intensely exaggerated emotional conceptual stories. They exaggerate. That's what the word means, delusional. It's a brilliant word in English. They cause us to be delusional. When we see this, when we get this is a unique quality of the Buddhist psychological model, the deluded, the neurotic, the unhappy states of mind. Not the love and compassion and kindness. They're not delusional. They're not disturbing. They're spacious and they're reasonable because they are in sync with reality. And this is Buddha's key point. He's not being fundamentalist in saying we shouldn't be angry, we shouldn't be attached, we shouldn't have ego grasping. He's telling us that they're the source of our pain and that he's found methods to get rid of them. I mean, my goodness, it's an incredible thing to say. So when you've realized the true nature of how things exist, your own self and everything else, there is no longer any attachment. There's no longer aversion. There's no longer depression, anxiety. There can't be, because Buddha has found that these are not at the core of our being. And this again is something that's shocking. As I said before, we give them equal status along with love and compassion and intelligence in our models of the mind. There's no view that says we could get rid of these things. This is quite extreme, but this is what Buddha has found from his own direct experience. This is the job he's done himself. It's interesting. I always quote this story. It was happened in New Zealand, in Nelson, actually, years ago when I was there, and I gave a public talk. And one fellow who turned out he was a scientist, it's kind of interesting, he was a scientist, and he asked this question, and I've never had this question before or since. So it was quite brilliant. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? And I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings about relativity to him? And of course, he and everybody else laughed like a joke, you know. Of course we wouldn't, because we know that Einstein's this clever fellow who used his noggin, who used his intelligence, and he observed the world. He just didn't live in the sky in his head. He observed the world out there, and he came up with certain observations. He tested them. He then codified them as rules, and then he presented them. Is that not what we mean by science? Botany, mathematics, engineering, you name it. That's Buddha's approach. No more and no less than that. So that's very shocking to hear this, because we think it's religion, you know. As the Dalai Lama says, if you follow Buddhist methodology at step by step, you know, and what's Buddha's methodology? It's the same as Einstein's. It's what he did himself. If you follow that and then you go ticking the boxes as you go, and then at some point you directly experience that what Buddha says isn't true, then of course you must reject the Buddha. And that's the same with Einstein. But we don't think of Buddhism like that. We're intellectually lazy. We'd rather just believe something, you know. We've got to squeeze our brains. Lama's right. But fear is the energy, is the taste, is the flavor of all the neuroses. That's why if you ever read the stories, you read the yogis' stories, you read about the great yogis, and one of the qualities that is inexorable and is inevitable when you read about it, it is his holiness alone. His holiness, a real human being on the planet in front of us. Everybody with half a brain can see the man's a happy man. He's a joyful fellow. He's not depressed, angry, pulling his hair out. Well, his hair out's already, isn't it? But you understand. He's joyful. We kind of think, oh, these spiritual people, I don't know why they're happy, but they must do something weird. Well, the Buddhist ones are happy because they've cut the delusions, people. They're not all anguished and suffering. I mean, we can see it with the Dalai Lama. He's the most obvious example for us. He's the proof of the pudding of this path. Happy and joyful and wise and funny. And he hasn't stopped for 60, 70 years, I think it's now. He was 16 when they appointed him to run Tibet. Can you imagine? 1950 or something. Can you imagine? And he hasn't stopped in 60 plus years trying to find methods to stop the suffering. And he's still a happy, wonderful fellow. I mean, we should look at that. And this is a kind of mind-boggling example, you know, because the fears of the ego have been cut. I think it's incredible to think that it's possible. I mean, they should give us such encouragement that this is our true nature. In Mahamudra meditation, there's no doctrine. This gets us very excited. This is delicious for people. We love this. In Mahamudra meditation, there's no doctrine, no theology, no philosophy, no God, no Buddha. We go beyond name, beyond shape and color, beyond the relative, beyond self-image, beyond compassion. With our own consciousness, we can experience the universal infinity. He's not kidding. We can just be in the experience of totality. I mean, we love hearing the delicious words like this. Using Buddhist terminology, we say that Mahamudra is beyond arising and beyond cessation. Mahamudra is only experience. The moment I say words, you interpret them in this way or that, and then it becomes a problem. So don't trust my words. They are the false words of my superstition. Buddhism thinks that way. No matter what words I say, they still come from my conceptions. You have to go beyond words. So, I mean, this gets us, you know, again, we can spend a month on this. This gets us to this very specific, very unique approach to what the mind is and how it functions according to Buddhist psychology, you know. So let's just look at what the mind is just for a second. Remind ourselves, what are we discussing here? Well, the words mind and consciousness are synonymous in Buddhism, broadly speaking, used in different contexts. First point. Second, and this is crucial to take as our working hypothesis. If we can prove this point to be wrong, that mind is not physical, if we can prove it to be wrong, then the whole of Buddhist worldview, this vast model of this view of the universe, this model, this psychological model, this philosophy, this epistemology, you name it, the whole of the Buddhist worldview will collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense. If we can prove that Buddha's assertion that mind isn't physical, if we can prove it to be wrong. So, but this is our hypothesis here. The mind is not physical. It is not of the brain. It is not a function of the brain. Now, it doesn't mean you don't need a brain. Body and mind, there are detailed descriptions of this. We're going to go into this, especially using the Vajrayana model. You know, the body and mind, physical and mental, are intimately, inextricably linked. So it's a whole different way of seeing, you know, the mind itself, consciousness itself is not a function of the brain. So this is interesting. When I was working on Lama Rinpoche's book, How to Face Death Without Fear, this marvelous handbook, you know, step by step, how to help your loved ones, you know, months and weeks before death, days. It's a really brilliant book with lots and lots of practices in it, exactly explaining the Buddhist approach to death and what happens at death, blah, blah, blah. So I remember reading, while I was editing that book, I remember reading this wonderful book by this wonderful, funny American medical journalist called Nick Teresi. And the book is called The Undead, not about zombies. His expertise is death. People always wonder why he's not depressed, but he's a very funny fellow, you know. So the book is all about the obstacles and contradictions and problems, certainly in the United States, in the medical profession now, real confusion about when death actually does occur. You know, because obviously the materialist model is based on the brain, and when you're brain dead, you're dead. But, you know, then, I mean, over this, for example, he pointed out that over the centuries, and we know this, in every culture, you find experiences of people who, quote unquote, come back to life after they're dead. Even I heard in the Victorian times in England or the UK or something, that the people in your coffin have a little bell in case you wake up in your damn coffin. So you ring the bell politely. I'm still alive. Please get me out of here. I mean, it's not an uncommon experience for people to come back to life. So this is a very common thing now in this profession. Well, it's most inconvenient. You're about to cut this damn guy's liver out and he comes back to life. You know, you got all your people lined up for the new liver. He was quite cynical about the profession, not about people. I mean, Lama Zopa, in this book, there's a chapter, the many things in this book, the different scenarios when you die, what to do if your loved one dies at home, what to do if your loved one dies in hospital, what to do if your loved one gives their organs. And so it's a very interesting point for the Buddhists. We'll go into this. But I remember, you know, what was the point I was going to make? I'm sorry, I forgot. Never mind. But anyway, there's this obstacle because people are now coming back to life and they don't know how to explain it. And so there's he's got a whole chapter, for example. Himself, he's an atheist about these things. He's, you know, has no views. He's quoted people. And we all know about people who have out-of-body experiences during their operations, right? So there you are, unconscious. Your senses are not working, but there you are. Everybody has this floating above their body experience and quote exactly, you know, quote exactly what the doctors are saying, what instruments they use, what they did. And of course, you can't explain this. From the brain science point of view, you can't explain this. And so, and in general, the people are quite cynical about it, he said. But there was one woman, he joked about this one woman, who had to have such a radical procedure that she basically, from their point, they had to quit all her organs. So from their point of view, there was no way she could be conscious, but she had the most vivid out-of-body experience. So they just can't explain. So I think it's marvelous that people are now looking at these things, forcing to look at their assumptions of what is consciousness. So I'm getting to the point. One doctor in this business was quoted as saying, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but that much I can say. So I think it's marvelous that people are, you know, discussing all these things now with this holiness and all these amazing best brains of the Tibetan Buddhist world having discussions with the best brains of the modern world. It's more and more of this is happening these days. People are questioning assumptions about what consciousness is, what is life, in other words. It's marvelous that it's happening. And more and more now of all the Buddhist literature over the centuries is becoming available to modern people, and it's being taken very seriously. So this view of, anyway, Buddha's view, your mind is not your brain. Your brain absolutely plays a role, but the Buddha's view is the other crucial point. This is where we get to in Mahamudra. This is a crucial point in Buddhism, that your mind has got subtler levels of cognition that don't depend upon the brain. So there's two modes of meditation in Buddhism, which are employed here in Mahamudra. So the first one is known, as we know, is called calm abiding, shamatha in Sanskrit. So that even in the sutra practice, and this is a Hindu technique, Buddha took it with him when he diverged in his own direction. But it's very clear that this technique enables you to completely cease the grosser levels of your consciousness, your conceptual and your sensory. Now, that's all we posit in our brain science, pretty much. I mean, I haven't studied neuroscience, but pretty much. We don't posit these subtler levels of consciousness. So actually, if you saw a person who was fully sitting there in calm abiding, deep in samadhi, in concentration, at this subtler level of mind, their senses and their conceptuality and their brain completely ceased, they would look like they were dead. So clearly, that's not how we talk in modern psychology. But this is becoming more and more known these days and more respected as a valid view, you know, and this is the point here. So mind is not physical. It is not the brain. The grosser level, it absolutely inextricably exists in dependence upon the brain. And I would suggest, without insulting neuroscientists, that what goes on in the brain, and indeed in all the physical, they're merely indicators of what goes on in the mind. They're physical indicators of what go on in the mind. That's probably not a bad way to put it. Consciousness doesn't, and this is the other point that's shocking for us, and this is massively important. The experiential implications of this point in Buddhism are profound. Your consciousness, which means your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, you know, whatever words you want for this entire spectrum of your inner being. This is your mind, your consciousness. Not one atom of it comes from, and not possible to come from, another person, a creator or your mummy or daddy. This is fundamental in Buddhism. Your brain, no problem. Mummy and daddy gives you a nice, decent brain. And the genes and the DNA and the body and the chemicals and the nerves and the womb and all the things. Yes, mummy gives you those. But she does not give you a mind. So you don't, and we can see in our neuroscientific models, in our materialist philosophical models, of course we track ourselves back to mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, and the monkeys, but not for the Buddha. Not for the Buddha. So it takes quite a getting used to if we're not used to hearing it, you know. But nor do you track yourself back to a creator. That's, and I'm a bit insulting sometimes, a bit rude and blunt how I talk, but that's the wackiest idea for the Buddha. I mean, there's like extensive discussions we can have again for 1 month just on this topic of how it's not viable so that you can come from a creator. So our mind, our thoughts and feelings and emotions and psychoses and love and compassion and be good at football or music or our sainthood, they do not come from anyone else. This is the hugest point in Buddhism, that they are contents of my mind. So the source of my mind at this moment is the previous moment of mind. Think of your mind as a river of mental moments. This moment of mind comes from the previous, And if you had perfect memory, you know you could track yourself back in an unbroken chain of mental moments and you'd get back inexorably to the first second of conception. So the second before conception, the egg was in mummy's body, sperm was in daddy's body, minding their own business. Where was your mind? Honey, the previous second of this river of mental moments. And a few weeks before that, it was in a previous body. And a life before that was in a previous body. And a life before that was in a previous body. And this is all the law of cause. So this is why, I know the Christians have extensive teachings in their philosophy of how there can be a first cause, not for the Buddha. This is one of his major discussions. You know, he argues with the Hindus as well. It's the very way that things exist that he's describing. It's not just being argumentative, you know. So consciousness is its own beginningless, he would say, and the Mahayana view says endless continuity of mental moments. And the law of karma, which Lama doesn't discuss much here because it just doesn't come into it, but we're discussing it here. The law of karma is what runs this mind. Whatever we do in this mind is what programs our mind. We can mold our mind into any shape we like, Lama Zopa says, you know. So His Holiness calls karma self-creation. So these are the main points about that have to underpin our understanding of the Buddha's views. The mind is not physical. It is yours. Whatever's in it is yours. You put it there. All the rubbish and all the goodness. That the goodness is the core of your being and can be perfected, and the rubbish can be rid of because it's not intrinsic. It's not integral to your being. It's adventitious. These are the points that Buddha has found. I mean, they're marvelous. They're delicious, you know, to think, even to contemplate them, even to hypothesize them. If you can prove him wrong, no problems. Go for it. Prove him, you know. Meanwhile, how delicious. At least it's optimistic. What's the time? 10 to 9. What? I started at 9 o'clock. What time did we start? 8 o'clock. Oh, it's only 40 minutes, 50 minutes. Okay. So before I go further, I've just said a few things now. I'd like you to ask me some questions, just to clarify terms, clarify points, words I've used, whatever you like. I've said a few things. Ask me some questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'll keep talking. If there's not any questions, it really is okay. So have there any in the chat box, Jennifer?
Venerable, I have a question.
Whose eye? Which eye is this?
Katrina.
Where are you? Oh, hello, Katrina. Yes, talk to me, sweetheart.
I understand the concept that mummy and daddy don't make us, and we're a continuum of our own consciousness.
Okay. Yeah.
I just wondered, there's huge conversations at the moment around mental health.
Yes.
And addiction running in families and bipolar running in families. So does that mean it's more of a karmic connection then?
Yes, that's a good point.
There does seem to be they talk about really strong genetic links with mental health issues. And I just wanted some clarity around how much of that is genetics, how much is karma, sort of how that plays out.
I understand, Katrina. It's a really good point. Thank you so, so much. Okay, yeah. Yes, absolutely. So let's say, you know, due to, I mean, the topic of karma doesn't come into this book, but I think we can certainly discuss it, you know. So just briefly, the Buddha's view for Katrina, Katrina knows this, but just for everybody else, the Buddha's view is that this mind is runs within the law of karma. This law of karma runs the universe. No one makes it up. No one runs it. It's not punishment, not reward. There's no creator. Buddha's observed it, like botany, like anything. It's just a law that runs the universe. And this is, again, unique to the Buddha. Well, the Indians have it. That everything that any mind thinks and does and says programs that mind, leaves seeds in that mind, and then ripens necessarily in the future as the person we become. We're not just talking this life, but future lives. And there's 4 main ways that our actions, karma means action, roughly, ripen. And Buddha's saying there's nothing that we ever say, do, and think goes astray. Everything is in here. Like every seed you plant in the ground will necessarily bring some kind of fruit. Whatever we think and do and say necessarily brings some kind of fruit. So generally speaking, we can describe those fruits as happy fruits and suffering fruits, speaking simply. So 4 ways our karma ripens. One is a type of rebirth. One is the tendencies in the mind in that rebirth. The third one, and this is where so there's 2. The tendencies is one, which is the mind, isn't it? So whatever tendencies you've got. So, you know, she's talking about the words like bipolar, which is in the Buddhist view would be an extreme example of the uncontrolled up and down mind of attachment and aversion. I mean, that's a way of putting it. That, you know, that's the samsaric suffering of all beings, but some people have it extra strong. There's no question about that. That's mental. That's the mind. And that, for the Buddha, those tendencies come in the mind. They're in that mind. Let's say that one brother in a family of 5 kids, you know, let's say in one of your case, your models, Katrina, whatever, they've got a very strong tendency for up and down. The world might call it bipolar, might call it schizophrenic, whatever you want to call. And you can see it in 5 kids in the family, or 3 aunties and uncles have it. So we can deduce it. It does seem to be something that's in the genes or the DNA or whatever. So the Buddhist view is this, that those 5 people, let's say those 5 kids, all with a tendency, have all got similar kind of minds from past lives, all been in different lives in the past, but they've got certain kind of tendencies. They've got a strong karmic connection, and they all get born to the same mummy. So let's say it could be the same with cancer, Katrina. You know, mummy might have the genes to get cancer. So this is now the other karma. Another way karma ripens. One is your own tendencies. So that's the mental one. And you can be similar to each other. I mean, you know, my family, I mean, there's 7 of us in my family, 7 siblings. We've got many similarities, many similar mental states of mind, many similar tendencies, but they're all our own. We all bring from our own, but they're similar. We've got some connection, and we all come together in the same family. So we bring them ourselves, and they don't come from the genes. They don't come from the DNA. They do not come from mummy and daddy. You track them back to your own. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you can have a family of 7 people who are all white supremacists. That's a bunch of mental states, isn't it? They believe this, they've got all political views. They're all their own views. Mummy taught them, but they have to be in the mind first. You know, one kid cannot be a white supremacist. They've got the same mummy, but they didn't bring those tendencies with them. So there's a strong karmic connection, but their own individual tendencies, there's no doubt. It can be the same with a physical one. Now, this is the other way karma ripens. It's called experiences similar to the cause, which is to do with your body and how to do with how you're seen and treated. And then the 4th one is environmental karma, which is to do with health and sickness. Well, mummy, 7 kids could get born to one mummy who's got genes that she's got a tendency to get cancer. Well, the 7 of us who all got the same genes, you could say, or 3 of us in the family, all due to past killing, are born to that mummy who's got genes that causes us to get cancer. But the main cause of it is the past killing. Always the main cause is the past. And then you're born in that environment, in that country, and you have group karma. You understand, Katrina, what I'm saying?
So that then gives you the environment for it to ripen, basically.
That's right, exactly.
Seeds are there anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Family
That's
is
right.
the ripening environment.
Now, it's exactly the same as other qualities. I mean, my mother was a musician. Well, every one of me and my siblings have all shown some tendency to be artistic or musicians. It's exactly the same as the good stuff. But, you know, so my mummy taught me music when I was a little girl. She saw that I had the tendency to be a good singer, so she taught me singing. So naturally we'd say, oh, Robina's good at singing because her mummy was a singer. No, Robina's good at singing because she had a tendency to sing from the past, have a musical tendency. My mother's good at music because she brought that from the past. And then I created the karma to be born to that mummy such that when she taught me, she nourished my music. She didn't give me music, she nourished my music. That's the way to put it. Do you understand, Katrina? Good, darling. Thank you so much. Okay, any more questions? Thank you. Any more question? And then I'll carry on otherwise. Okay,
hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, who are you?
Denny.
Benny, good talk to me, Benny.
Danny.
Danny. Are you New Zealand? Is it Danny or Denny?
Danny with a A.
Oh, you're a New Zealander, I can tell.
I am, yes.
I know, darling. So talk to me, Danny.
Is there a place where the mind can be rather than going from one life to the next? Is there a place where the mind can rest?
Stay. Absolutely. Yes, of course, Danny. That is the Buddhist view. There are two, there's two kind of goals you hear about in Buddhism. The word nirvana is very popular. So the first goal that we can accomplish, like I said before, the word Buddha has these two meanings. The first syllable tells you you've rid the mind of all the rubbish. That, in a sense, is the achievement of your own nirvana, your liberation from suffering. And when you've accomplished that, you don't need to get reborn. You stay in this subtle state of total bliss. But if you add the compassion part to it, even though you don't need to get born, out of your compassion to help others, you will come back and then you will work to help others. So, yeah, but that's your own nirvana, your own liberation from suffering, and it causes you cut the causes of rebirth, and you just stay in a subtle state of bliss.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, that'll do. So we'll carry on. Okay. So I'll keep saying lamas, these delicious words of lamas. So using Buddhist terminology, we say that Mahamudra is beyond arising, beyond cessation. Mahamudra is only experience. Oh no, I read you that. So we also say that Mahamudra has no dimension, no distinct nature, no cause or effect. Remember, when Shakyamuni Buddha discovered enlightenment, he was silent for several weeks. He felt it was not possible to express the deep, universal Mahamudra experience to others. Such profound things cannot be explained to anybody who hasn't reached that stage. So now the next thing is the Lama talks about, and I'll just talk about it, I'll paraphrase Lama. There's two, and this is a really delicious one, there are two, we all know that the typical way you learn something, and we are very good at this in our culture, we're brilliant at it. It's like if you want to learn music, you want to learn numbers, you want to learn cake making, we all know you start with the theory. You don't just go to the kitchen. We know this. You don't just go to the kitchen and be all intuitive with not knowing a single thing about cooking. But hear my point, with knowing nothing. You don't know what flour or eggs or a spoon or a teaspoon or fat. You don't know anything about anything. You do not just go to the kitchen and sort of look at things and try and put them together and create a cake. You'll take quite a while, I would suggest, to stumble upon the right ingredients. Now, we all know that would be, if you can do that, you're pretty intuitive. You've got a lot of wisdom. You can see that. Now, but the typical way we learn, you go to a person who knows how to do it and you say, please show me how to make a cake. Now, I always use this example of me when I first made a cake from my mum, And this is a good example of how you find a teacher, which is a crucial part of the Buddhist path, finding a valid teacher. I didn't know how to make a cake. I was 25. I was in London in the 1960s, and I was a hippie. And the first moment in my life, I remember it vividly, that I decided I want to make a cake. It was then. So I was going home anyway to Melbourne. So I went home and I asked my mum to show me how to make a cake. I bet she was so happy. The thing is, she's known how to make cakes all my life, but I never asked her. So she was sensible enough not to shove it down my throat, So the thing is, I wanted to make a cake. So then she showed me how to make a cake. And this is also the dual purpose of this story. It's also the benefit of a teacher. That I checked on her qualifications, I checked on her disciples, my sisters, I checked on the product, I'd done my due diligence. I didn't just ask my mum because I was being sentimental. I knew she was a valid cake maker. So then I wanted to make the cake. That's a crucial point. So then I asked her, and this is the interesting point. I remember the day, the kitchen, it's in my mind, like a picture, and the cake. It was an apple and walnut cake, and I was ready. I wanted to do it. She knew how to do it. The two of us came together. She showed me, and I listened, and I haven't made a cake in 30 years, I promise, but I bet I could make a good cake again because I listened. The recipe went in. I got like a transmission from my mother, So the thing is, that's how we learn how to make anything. You listen to someone who knows how to do it. You listen to the theory. She explained the function of the eggs, the function of the flour. It went into my mind. And then I saw the result. The cake came out, you know. So that's how we learn how to do everything. That's the intellectual method. And it's a good method. It's marvelous. But this is the point that Lama's making here. There are two ways of realizing emptiness. So realizing emptiness is realizing Mahamudra. It's just the style they use here. To realize the emptiness of your own mind in the depths of meditation. So that's why Lama says, so there's two methods, and Lama talks about it. He said when he was a kid, he went to the monastery, and that's the classical first way of learning. He went and he squeezed his brain. He studied for 20, 25 years, all the learning. So I'll read what Lama says, you know. So perhaps if you're thinking that if Mahamudra is about emptiness, then you've heard it many times before. You're right. The teachings are not so different. But the unique approach of the Mahamudra way of presenting the universal reality of consciousness. So Mahamudra technically is about the emptiness of the mind. But Lama also taught about the emptiness of the self, you know, because that's what, back in those days, it was probably one of these first teachings. We wouldn't have known the difference. So the experience of emptiness rather than the explanation of what it means. This is the thing that's unique about Mahamudra. In the text I'm using here, you know, Lama, he says there are two methods. There are two approaches, two methods for realizing emptiness. Non-duality, Mahamudra, the ultimate nature of how everything exists. So there's the one of seeking meditation on the basis of the view, which means you learn first the words. I learned the recipe. I squeezed my brain. I got the theory. Or the other method is seeking the view on the basis of meditation. That would have been if I'd just gone to the kitchen and intuited the flour, the milk, the eggs, and put together a cake. Obviously, that would be pretty advanced, wouldn't it? Or can you imagine with music? The classical way to learn music. You listen to these, I mean, like Western classical music. The complicated theories are unbelievable. You've got to squeeze your brain like you can't imagine, learning these complex theories. Can you imagine? Now, that's the typical way to learn. The other way to learn, and this is the Mahamudra one, you would go straight to the piano and you would intuit the music of Bach. Now, we know there are some people who are like that. Now, but this is what's interesting. This is an added point here. I mean, I love watching on YouTube some of these kids, 4, 3, 5, 6, who are these unbelievable genius musicians. You can't believe your eyes. And of course, if you have the Buddhist view of karma, it completely makes sense. They've done the work before. They come into this life fully programmed with music, and off they go playing Bach, you know. Now, that's the Mahamudra approach. And there are many yogis like that. Lama talks about Milarepa. He did not study. He did not squeeze his brain. So we have to deduce, of course, that he'd done the work in a past life, but he went straight into meditation. That's the Mahamudra approach. So even though on the face of it, it sounds easy, no doctrine, no dogma, no Buddha, no this, no that, it's actually, it indicates a highly advanced person. Who can go to Bach and play? If you're 6 years old, you've clearly done it before. Of course, in the modern world, we have no explanation of why this little kid can play Bach, you know. But this is exactly the approach. So the first one is to squeeze your brain first. And Lama says, that's exactly what I did in the monastery, you know. So which one is right? Well, they're both right. But here we are following the second approach. We're following the intuitive one to go straight into meditation. And this is what we're going to describe, the technique of then learning to identify the ego and cut it and to realize emptiness in meditation. So the first approach, learn about emptiness first, then meditate. So when we used the first approach when I studied in the monastery. We read so much, memorizing and reciting and debating philosophical texts every day. Buddhist philosophy is so sophisticated, so intellectual, involving highly complex thinking. I thought that if I understood all the philosophy, the middle way, everything, I'd knock out the ego. I thought about that a lot. I checked, and then I realized my conception was not true. I was shocked. I realized that even if I knew all the Buddhist texts and understood them intellectually, it would never touch my heart unless I meditated. So this is what Lama, from the very beginning, he's never encouraged his students to like learn Tibetan. He said to me, no, not to me, but people, he said, I was shocked. As soon as people start getting, learning Tibetan, becoming philosophical, you start becoming intellectual and you lose the experience. He's always very much into the experience, cut past all the intellectual. Although he was a great scholar, there's no doubt he was a great scholar. You can't argue with that. When we learn, and he says he can see it, and this is true about the West, modern people. I mean, all the Tibetans are very amazed at the technological brilliance of modern people. We can call it the West, but it's not just the West, but super educated. We're super educated. But the biggest danger, and this is the clear one, the biggest danger, and Lama pointed this out all the time, was you can be so excited about the philosophy, you can be so seduced by all these brilliant ideas, you can speak them perfectly, you can present the teaching on emptiness perfectly, but if you don't meditate, if you don't experience it, if you don't work on your mind, if you don't give up attachment and anger and neuroses, then you are a disaster. It's like learning all the cake recipes, but not knowing how to make a cake. In terms of cooking, you'd be a fraud. But our biggest problem with intellectual knowledge is we confuse it with experiential knowledge. And this is the biggest problem we've got, When we learn the words alone, there's no satisfaction. The problem of ego is not solved. And now I look at many of my students, they read so many books, all the philosophy, the psychology, so much information, all this reading. Of course, with this approach, we must also meditate. You've got to do both, in other words. Lama Tsongkhapa talks about the union of the three wisdoms that arise from hearing, analyzing, and meditating. In Tibetan, we say Trojung, Sangjung, and Gomjung. But people sometimes misinterpret this. They hear that Uyghur Lugpas study for 20 or 30 years and think it means that first you listen for 20 years, then you check for another 20 years, and then finally you penetrate in meditation. In fact, from the beginning, we integrate these three wisdoms. We practice them simultaneously. And at each stage of our development, it's a question of proportion. Nevertheless, there is the danger that your knowledge will remain merely intellectual. If you don't go beyond the intellectual level, your mind will not be transformed. It's as if the knowledge stays in the books and you are separate from it. You can never get rid of ego this way. You end up missing the point. And this is the biggest danger. I mean, and this is not just talking about realizing emptiness. I mean, before we realize emptiness, before we cut the root delusion, we've got to have controlled discipline behavior. We've got to not kill, steal, and jump on the wrong partner. And then we've got to work on our mind and learn about what attachment is, what aversion is, what depression is, what jealousy is, and not always blame the object, but to know our mind. This is incredibly difficult practice. Unbelievable. We love the theories of it, but to experience the truth of this, that's real practice. And this is really tough, The second approach, meditate first, then discover emptiness. It's extremely difficult to knock out the ego. You cannot seek the ego's projections philosophically with your intellect. When you practice Mahamudra, intellect is the enemy. You have to go beyond the intellect. You have to meditate. Then real transformation can come. We have to understand, Buddha Maitreya said, that the relative Dharma, everything in the books, is like a bridge. A bridge is helpful for crossing a river, but once you cross the river, it's goodbye bridge, isn't it? You have to touch the heart. Once you've experienced the fundamental nature of your own consciousness, it's goodbye to all the philosophical concepts. And we kind of know this, sort of if you're good at music, first you squeeze your brain, you learn the theory, you don't remember, you struggle for your poor fingers to play the piano, but eventually when you've perfected that, it's automatic, isn't it? You don't have to think anymore. You don't say F, B major, you've completely programmed in it and you do it spontaneously. That's experience. We know this, So philosophy is the equipment that we use to reach beyond the bondage. But still, it is bondage, isn't it? I'm not trying to be revolutionary. Of course, the philosophy is good. It is unbelievably profound. We should respect it. But we are seekers and we can make mistakes. We can interpret the teachings wrongly. So we need to develop the skill to go beyond philosophy. We should not be afraid to go beyond it. When the great yogis Milarepa and Lama Tsongkhapa went into retreat in the mountains, they didn't bring their books with them. They went beyond scriptures, beyond ink, beyond Parker pens. Who's got a Parker pen these days? We don't even know what one is, do we? And even as a boy, Lama Tsongkhapa meditated and communicated directly with Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. So it is definitely possible first to meditate and then discover emptiness. This is the approach here. Mahamudra is a super incredible method. This is the experience of the lineage lamas, all the great yogis and yoginis. They all realized Mahamudra in meditation. So I think on that, why don't we do the first part of Mahamudra? So but first discuss briefly the two modes of meditation in Buddhism. Thousands of techniques, okay? But two ways of meditating. The first one, and each of these techniques, each of these meditations are known in terms of their result. So as I said before, the first one is known as calm abiding, shamatha in Sanskrit. So it's the end result of this hard work of getting your mind to become super focused, to go beyond the grosser level, to cease the conceptual, to cease the sensory, to this subtler level of cognition. Like I said, that we don't even posit as existing in neuroscience and psychology, you know. So there you got this laser-like single-pointed focus. Now, in one of the chapters, Lama, and they rarely do this in the teachings, Lama goes into the actual experiential results, some of the unbelievable experiential results of accomplishing single-pointed concentration. And I'll read this out next week. It's like mind-boggling, you know, I think it's in your course notes. You should look at it. The experience of samadhi is incredible. Many of the lamas don't do this, but Lama always wanted to get us excited. He wanted to get us energized. He wanted to get us enthusiastic about the teachings, you know. And so this is really showing us, when you read that chapter, I think it's in the notes, then it's like science fiction. It's like impossible to believe that anybody can have these experiences. But that's what the Buddhists have found. This is coming from the Hindus 3,000 years ago. This is the human potential. And you could be forgiven for thinking you've achieved enlightenment, but you haven't, nowhere near it. The Buddha, in fact, would say we've had concentration, we've had calm abiding in many lifetimes. It's just that we haven't used it to realize emptiness, which is what you do in the second mode of meditation, Vipassana, special insight. So, of course, there's many Vipassana techniques that Lord Buddha taught. And the one that in the world is known as Vipassana is one particular technique where you're using your concentrated mind to focus on the sensations of the body. So what Lord Buddha wanted us to get insight into isn't the body. We get very confused about this, is impermanence. But this particular technique here, special insight, he wants us to get insight into the emptiness of our own mind. So why don't we just do a few minutes now, start with the first mode of meditation. The first mode of meditation is concentration. Everybody's done something like you concentrate on the Buddha, you concentrate on your breath. They're the typical objects of concentration. But here, this is the unique characteristic of Mahamudra. The object of your concentration is your own mind. So, and all that means is whatever thoughts pop up in your mind. So that's what we're going to do for like 5 quality minutes. So let's just get settled. We'll go through the body first. Get your body organized, okay? So His Holiness Dalai Lama says it's marvelous if you can sit in full lotus position, even just for a second at the beginning of your session. It's very auspicious for the ability to be able to do it in the future. Because when we get to the advanced practices, it seems, you know, it's ideal to sit like that. But if you can, with one leg on, or both legs on the other thigh, fantastic. That would be a perfect way to sit. But if you can't, that's okay. Sit with one leg on the other thigh. If you can't do that, ordinary cross-legged. So maybe most of us at the moment are sitting in a chair. But the ideal, the first point, there's about 8 points of the meditation posture that all the yogis have found to be most conducive to good meditation. So the first one is the legs. So if you can be in full lotus, brilliant. And if you are, the second point is your bottom. So you'd have a cushion just underneath the coccyx propping you up. It's really helpful to keep the body very stable and slightly thrust upwards, you know, otherwise you get the feeling of falling backwards. So of course, we've got to find the cushion that works best for us, because perhaps most of us aren't very flexible. So your legs first. whether it's in full lotus, half lotus, or sitting cross-legged. And then your bottom, whichever cushion works for you, the 2 points. Now, most of us perhaps in a chair, then the crucial point is you don't sit in a very sinking, comfortable couch. You'll just go to sleep. It's ridiculous. You've got to be stable. So the really important thing is if you're in a chair, keep your feet firmly planted on the ground and then don't lean against the back of the chair. You need to hold up your own body. This is crucial because otherwise the body slumps, then the subtler energies can't flow smoothly and the mind then becomes dull. So have your body upright, okay? Feet on the ground, body upright. So the next third point for all of us is the back. So of course the back isn't straight, it's curved, but have your back upright. That's really important. But our trouble is, this is my added point. When we have the body upright, we squeeze our muscles, we tense the muscles. They mention the shoulders. The fourth point is the shoulders. Have your shoulders upright, but relaxed. So think of your whole body, all your muscles. Think of your abdomen especially. Flop the muscles. So put your back upright, hold your back upright, keep it upright, and now flop the muscles. That's the combination of an upright body, but the muscles not tense. So your legs, your bottom, your back, your shoulders. The next one is your hands. So there's many mudras or gestures all the great meditators might use, but the classic one we learn is like this: the left hand underneath, right hand on top, thumbs touching, forming a triangle in your lap. So finally, your head, several points. And this has all come from the great meditators. They're all practical, you know, they've all got a purpose. So the head, the first one is your chin slightly tucked in, head tilted forward. Your jaw relaxed. Your tip of the tongue, this is odd. This lips apart, and this is odd, but there's logic to it. The tip of the tongue resting just behind the top teeth, near the palate. All the yogis have found that this causes you to not have to dribble. It's very practical for the ones who meditate a long time. Not have to swallow your spit. It's very practical. Jaw relaxed, lips apart, tip of the tongue between the top teeth. And breathe through your nose. Now finally your eyes. So again, all the great yogis who meditate for, you know, days on end, they have their eyes open because that, if they're meditating in the day, that allows the light to come in and that helps their mind stay sharp. But of course, they've got concentration. They're not distracted by the sensory objects. But most of us don't have that level of concentration. So perhaps have your eyes lightly closed. But the important point is your eyes beneath the eyelids should be looking down, as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. So to settle into this position now, and the trouble is we're so addicted to our bodies, we kind of have this feeling, oh, I'm meditating. Well, your body doesn't meditate, people. Your mind meditates. This is just to make it most conducive for your mind to do a good job. So just your legs, your bottom, your back, shoulders, hands, head slightly forward, chin tucked in, lips slightly apart, tip of the tongue behind the top teeth, eyes looking down. Now settle into this position and then forget about it. So now the next thing we're going to do is start to locate what it is we're going to concentrate on. The crucial thing, we're going to discuss this more later, but the crucial point is when you do this concentration meditation, which is what the world knows vaguely as mindfulness, what you're doing very specifically is you're choosing a thing to focus on. You have to anchor your mind to something. Okay? So the typical one is the breath. Buddha taught that. It's very easy. You locate. We're not doing that here. Typically in our Tibetan tradition, we will concentrate on a visualization. But here, the very specific object in Mahamudra meditation, and there's good reason for this, we'll discuss this. The object is your mind itself. Now, that's too broad. So at the moment, what your mind consists of is all the thoughts, isn't it? The thoughts never stopping chatting. So this is what we're going to focus on. So now, just with determination, what we're going to do is simply pay attention to whatever pops up in your mind. It's sort of like normally we're involved in our mind. We're swimming in our thoughts. We're so involved with them, we can't even see them. So we're going to step back, okay? Step back, and you're going to pay attention to whatever pops up in your mind. So it might sound confusing initially. Don't worry about it. But just simply do that. So you're going to pay attention. That's the mind part. And then what you're paying attention to is whatever pops up in your mind. And you're going to allow it to come, and you're going to allow it to go. Even if your mind is kind of crazy thoughts, doesn't matter. The goal here is not to wish the thoughts should go away. You're going to anchor your mind to the thoughts. So just do your best for like 3 or 4 quality minutes. Simply pay attention to whatever pops up in your mind. Now, if you start getting involved in them, relax and just come back to watching. If you forget what you're doing, just come back and just watch again. It's sort of like you're just going to watch without any opinion, any ideas, no discussion. You just watch the thoughts. Watch the thoughts. Pay attention to the thoughts. Just pay attention to whatever pops up. Let the thoughts come and go. Stay focused. So that's about 3 minutes is enough. Good start. Just relax now, okay? 3 minutes is 3 quality minutes is better than 20 minutes spacing out, I tell you. In fact, we did a whole retreat with Lama one time, and he made us do 5-minute sessions exactly like this, because 5 minutes really quality, really paying attention, really being alert is far superior for 20 minutes. Most of us sit there for 20 minutes and we think it's meditation. We're just spacing out. It's completely wrong. So just before we finish, 3 minutes to go. Are there any questions? If not, that's totally fine. We can just finish.
Hi, Robina.
Hello, my dear.
I'm
Yes.
so used to letting my thoughts go and then not really letting my attention go with them as an instruction. And
Sorry,
then,
what do you mean, Kim? I don't understand. What are you saying?
the discursive thinking that's naturally going on when I'm meditating is the instruction to kind of just view it, like just to watch it go
Sure,
by.
that's all. It's like you got a big bunch of voices outside on the street, everybody shouting. Instead of having opinions about it and wishing it wasn't there and wishing they'd go away and listening to what they're saying, you just observe it with no opinions. That's the job. Yes, exactly. I mean, it's hard because we're so close to our thoughts. It's hard to feel that we're watching, because we're usually involved in the thoughts, having conversations. You understand? It's automatic. That's how we normally are. We're gripped by all the stories. So as to learn, allowing the thought just to be there. And the thing, we're going to discuss this more in detail because we get very confused about how can my mind watch my mind. We get a bit sort of tricky about it. But there's many parts of our mind. And the part of the mind doing the job here is the one called attention. You're paying attention. And the object here is that whatever thoughts pop up. You understand, Kim? Good, darling. Wonderful. What else, people?
There's
So
another
you-
question in the chat box.
Good. What is it?
So it's from Holly. She asked if the first method is for everybody and the second method without the study, if that's only for people who have done the study already in a previous life.
I know, well, that's an interesting way to put it. I would say that would be the way it is, but it doesn't mean we can't try. But the assumption has to be, already the assumption has to be, that if we're sitting here now and going to teachings, listening to these teachings, understanding them, that we have done some work in the past. So that's kind of assumed, So the person who's most successful at it, obviously, is the person who's done the work before. But it's a powerful, for us, most of us, we would do the study and then we would do the meditation as well. So it's a powerful way to combine. We need to combine both. It's important to see the quality of both, Yes. But in general, I think it is right. A person who's really good at the Mahamudra, who gets it easily, they'd have to have it in the past. You've got to have, that's assumed anyway. You don't come fresh to something with no background, But it's a powerful one to do. But it takes time. I know when I first went to these teachings of Lamas, not this particular course, I don't know what he was talking about, watch my mind. We don't know what it means, watch our mind. Because why? It's because we're so caught up in the stories, we can't separate ourselves from them, So it would assume, yes, a person who's good at Mahamudra, it would assume, obviously, past, Milarepa is the example. Milarepa is a classic example. So clearly he's done the work before. It has to be this way. Exactly right. Yes. What else?
Can I ask a follow-up to that question?
Yeah.
On a practical level, is it advised to do Mahamudra meditation before we've done systematic study? Can we do that?
Well, that's the point. I know for my own self, when I first became a Buddhist, I listened to the teachings and I studied. I can't imagine doing Mahamudra. I had no interest in doing it. So everyone's got a very different kind of mind, Many people, we can see, I think, among the students, there are some people who just want to go to practice. There are some people who have to hear the thoughts first. I know my mind was so clear, I couldn't sit for more than 3 minutes. It was like a joke to talk about meditating, but I really was hungry to hear the teachings, but I wanted to make it experiential. So then I was able to start to meditate. So we've got to know what's right for us. We've got to know the kind of person we are, we've got to know. We've got to know what's right. But each of us has got different styles. It's really important. In the end, we all got to do both. There's no question. Many people have strong, the classic thing about the Kargyupas, Lama jokes about how people all say the Gelugpas squeeze their brains, and the classic one of the cliched views of the Kargyupas, that they practice. And you Gelugpas just study. That's the cliched view. But there are people who've got the karma with this Tibetan Buddhist path who walk straight into the Gompa and start their preliminaries and start their meditations. They've got immediate faith. So everyone's got a different style. We have to know, but in the end, we must do both. That's the point. Yes, Ginger. What happened to Ginger?
Thank you so much.
Oh, there she is.
Took
Good
me
job.
Took me a while to get here. So I was wondering if you could expound a little bit more on not spacing out versus paying attention.
Yes.
I kind of what would spacing out look like?
I understand. Well, first of all, I think our time is up, isn't it? We're finishing at 9:30. This is the time to finish, is it? 90 minutes. So I think, Ginger, it's a perfect one to start on next week. But I'll just say it briefly here. The tricky part is, and this is the job we have to do to navigate, whether you're watching your breath or watching your mind, the job is the same. Our problem is we're so addicted to having conversations. We don't just watch our thoughts. We're either completely unconscious and don't even notice what's there, or when the emotion is strong, we're completely in the middle of our thoughts. We're the central player, aren't we? So to be able to simply have the thoughts and just observe them is a bit of a weird experience for us. So spacing out, there's two main obstacles in meditation, and we'll go into this next week. The one obstacle is that your mind completely berserk and you can't stop thinking. You can't stop being engaged in the thinking. The second problem is you completely space out and you like go to sleep. And people often think that's meditation. Some people can relax very nicely, and that's just called sinking, and that's not meditation at all. So the two main dangers are the mind going berserk and you can't keep still, or you completely space out. And spacing out is like a very comfortable feeling, and many people think that's concentration, and it is absolutely not. And then eventually you just go to sleep. That's ridiculous, you know? So they're the two dangers. In fact, concentration, the end result of single-pointed concentration is when you've completely conquered those two extremes, when your mind is super subtle and super clear and super focused. You understand, Ginger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you, darling people. That's enough for now. So just read your course notes, try out a bit of meditation, read them. I mean, I think Lama talks about, I think, how to focus. I think, and I'm not sure in there, but have a look. But just try a bit of that. Think about the meaning, read the course notes, think about it, and we'll see each other next week, and we'll continue with Lama's delicious teachings.
Thank you so much, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Dong Chor, Sem Chog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam, Ke Guchi, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne, Gong Du, Baba Shok. Let's make body to grow and grow. Okay, let's do the prayers. We should. Okay.
We unmute first.
I'll do them. So the first one, go back where we were. Go back. Oh, where's the first one? Dedication. There it is. Stop. That's it. So I'll just say it in English, okay? So we'll just think, whatever positive karma we've created by listening, and Buddha would say every thought we have goes in the mind, stays there, all these marvelous seeds we planted, all these thousands of seeds we planted, it's a bit different, this one. This is okay. Nothing wrong with this prayer. May it benefit the sentient beings. I mean, in particular, may it cause. Anyway, that's okay. That's enough. So no more prayers. Don't leave it. Enough prayers. So delight in what we've done, all the seeds we planted, and may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. That's enough. Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, darlings.
Thank you. Thank you, Robina.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you, Jennifer. That was great.
Yeah,
Thank you from
beautiful.
Canada.
Thank you. Live here.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Doris.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I know, I love seeing everybody.
Oh, I love it. Very nice. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, Felicity.
Yeah, so great to be back.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah. Next week.
Yeah, great.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, hi, Ron.
Oh, hello, Jen. I was trying to find out how to unmute. I couldn't figure out.